Hey guys, and welcome to an on-time start to Confab. This is the first time, well, probably in a little while since we've actually had an on-time go live here, right, gentlemen?
Yeah, a little while.
Adam, I love what do we have here? Like this is interesting.
I like last week I did the the quarantine solidarity look. And I still have glasses, I guess, but if anybody is a Parks and Rec fan, I just woke up and was like, I don't know, I just had in my head, she's the worst. So I think I'm taking cues from Jean-Ralphio today.
I love it. It looks good. Way better than me. At least your hair, like you're able to stand your hair up. Like everyone in chat, you can go ahead and tease my hair now because Ron did it already. But I can't use product because it sticks up way too high. And so I was like, yeah, no, this is not gonna work. This is not gonna work. The unmasked Signer. Hey, Rad, how you doing? Good to see you. How is chat doing? I know we've got a couple of viewers that are on. Welcome to another Stoneridge Confab. Our hosts today, Adam Hallbeck, Marcus Hogg, and myself, Scott Verpeer, are going to be going over some manufacturing content today. So I guess today, like I said, gentlemen, it's all about manufacturing, and I know we've got some screens to show and some topics to cover. I think the big one we wanted to go through is just a little bit of the difference, obviously, between the platforms, because I think there's a little bit of confusion, obviously, in terms of what ERP system should I be using? Should I be using Business Central, or should I be using Supply Chain? And Microsoft has not done what I would classify as a really good job of really classifying that, right? Oh, here we go. We're here. They're coming in. Nice hair to all. Oh, Leah, you have no idea. Like there is an absolute black market right now for hairstylists, and I almost installed the Tor browser to go to that black market.
Peel that onion.
Well, if you guys, get the guts together to shave it off, I'll give you a hand here.
Yeah, this is. I think the last conversation. Adam is glowing. Yeah, you are glowing.
I mean, in true Jean-Ralphio, this is how I enter rooms.
So yeah, it's been good. I mean, we've been doing well, enjoying the outdoors as a family, getting lots of quality family time in as well. So it's been fun. I mean, the kids right now, I've got to make sure that they're not on the internet, otherwise we get drop streams and all this other kind of stuff. But the remote learning is working well for us, and we've been having fun. So I don't know about you guys, but
Yeah, my college freshman wrapped up her last final today.
well,
She's
congratulations.
yeah,
Hey, congrats. That's
finished
awesome.
it out. Finished her first year online. It's going okay.
Good.
Yep,
Well, if you guys go ahead. Sorry, Adam.
Oh no, I was gonna say for the first time, like I play music, and I haven't been able to. My whole dad's side of my family, we all pick guitars up, basses, drums. We've got the whole family band, and it was a little rocky, but we did get to play a couple of tunes, my cousin and I, last week on Facebook Messenger or something. So it was a little clunky, but it was a lot of fun to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, once you figure out the latency, right? I'm assuming you could probably get probably a fairly good groove if it's a consistent groove going, right? Yeah.
Definitely.
So, and in chat too, guys, as you guys have questions, that's why we do Confab. Please feel free to ask them. Share news. How's your day been? What's going on? We love interacting with you guys, so we're happy you're here. Today, obviously, once again, manufacturing. Marcus, I think we were going to give you the floor to start here, because really what we want to do is highlight, I think, three major areas, because that's really our domains, right, as well, call it. We obviously span many domains in terms of knowledge, but kind of our primary areas are, I'm looking at, for example, enterprise capabilities, and what we tackle from a manufacturing scenario, such as what we classify as mixed mode and all these complexities when it comes to manufacturing at the enterprise. And then on the SMB side, you'd be, kind of surprised to understand and know that, I mean, a lot of the higher end manufacturing requirements really scale down as well into mid-market, or what we call SMB and small and medium business. And we wanted to go through a little bit of those concepts too. And then kind of lastly, that's more of Marcus's domain. And then lastly, obviously with Adam too, kind of going through in more detail of the front end of a manufacturer, like how we were talking about order management and going through, Adam, if you want to interject some of those topics, but
Yeah, just really, so front end is the key there. So engaging with maybe like a sales rep network, what kind of tools can we use there? In collaboration with that network, when we consume certain projects or opportunities or more of the pipeline components, how do we push through and manage process? What tools can we use on the back end within say D365 sales or customer service or what have you? So more of the operational front end pieces and some of the tools, highlights that we can use, practical applications of some of the Power Platform tooling.
Perfect.
The other thing that we're
Yeah,
not showing today is, the other SMB option is in GP. So Dynamics GP does have manufacturing options as well. So if there are GP users out there, we know you're online. There's manufacturing functionality that's available.
Perfect. Marcus, I'm going to get you over, but we got to get the music going for Seinfeld here. So, we got Marcus's intro going on. There we go. Go ahead, switch him over. All right, take it away, Marcus.
All right. Couple things I wanted to talk about. Actually, one thing I wanted to talk about prior to manufacturing specific is the functionality around assembly orders in Business Central. So if you're an organization that has the needs to do what I would say light manufacturing kitting, that there is functionality available prior to needing full manufacturing, and that is what we call an assembly bomb. And I'm just gonna open up one here. Let's see. I think I got to look at my notes here. So this is just well, it's a computer package essentially, and under my bill of materials for assemblies, I have an assembly BOM here. And what the assembly BOM allows me to do is to create a multi-level bill of material if I wanted to. There are some limitations around planning when you get to sub-assemblies with assembly BOMs, but if I've got a flat bill of material, I have the ability to use assembly BOMs. Now, I don't have a routing with an assembly BOM, but I can still put items. I can put labor on there. I can track quantities, unit to measure conversions. So it's fairly robust if I don't need routing components. So that's, again, an assembly BOM. What I really like is the functionality that's connected to the sales order. So if I go to the sales order, I have the ability to actually create an assembly order from a sales order transaction. So I'm going to create a new one here, and I'll pick my customer, my Canon group, and I'll pick my item here. So my basic computer package, and I'm going to pick a quantity of 1. Now I have this item set up as an assembly item, and what I can do is on the sales order itself actually create the assembly order. So that's what it did down here. Thing I like about this is if you need to actually configure the item. Now I'm always cautious here. This is not a configurator, so it doesn't include, exclude logic, anything like that. I could basically put whatever I want on here, but I could put whatever I want on here. So if you are selling something like a computer where, instead of having one webcam for some reason, chrono time, I need 2 webcams on my computer, or if I wanted to upgrade memory, or I want to swap out a monitor, I can do that as I'm entering the sales order, and then that will affect then how the kitting process works. A couple things I can do from here, though, is if I go down to the line item level, I've got some functions to, I'm not going to be able to do this. Here we go. Assembly order. I've got the ability then to roll up the price and roll up the cost on there. So if we upgraded the memory, we added an extra webcam, whatever we might have done, my cost and my price changes. So I can make that change then on the sales order to reflect the correct pricing as well as the correct cost on the item. So again, assemblies, really cool if you don't need routings, but you still want to do some kitting. I also like the ability to do assemble to stock or assemble to order. So you could just use assemblies to stock items, pre-built kits, etc. Some nice functionality.
So I'm going to stop real quick, Marcus. So just to understand that, so there are different scales of manufacturing, is what we see in businesses, right? So there's what we would call light manufacturing, which may be more of this assembly component, right? That's part of it, where you've got parts that you want to group together almost like a kit. We used to call them kits in prior version. Assemblies have kind of replaced that, and so it also handles a lot of those costing implications too, right? Because if you have a kit that you produce a part off of, if you want an accurate margin report, for example, you're going to want the total cost of all those components, and even labor, potentially some labor time that rolls up into it, right?
Yep. So on an assembly order, if I pull up, so when I actually go to complete an assembly order, so this is that package that I created. If I open that up, I could have labor that is associated with. So to your point, we could put resources on here. Maybe Linda did the assembly on it, and it could be an hour and a half time, an hour, whatever it is. So I do have the true cost of that kit. Yep.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yep. Backflushing, right? So when you close that kit out or post it, that's when that labor is actually backflushing to it. It's not not multi-step. We're not talking about more than one step with it. You could have more than one resource on it technically, but you're not doing multiple steps. Okay.
Yep. I have implemented assembly orders with 2 clients, and they actually had a real basic routing, and what they didn't want was the overhead of implementing a full manufacturing system. So they used assemblies, and then just didn't use the ERP system to naturally or to track the routing steps, and they didn't need to schedule that sort of thing. So they could leverage the assembly BOM, again, going with the more simple implementation of the product, and it accomplished what they needed to. They could put a basic labor, essentially a single line of the labor time it took to track the item. So it's a way to get that multi-level BOM into the system, but there are simpler ways to implement manufacturing than having to go to a full manufacturing system if you don't really need that.
Yep. Okay.
All right, so the other thing we've got then is we do have full manufacturing in Business Central. So if we pick up this bicycle here, we do have the ability to do full routings and production bombs on the items. So if we go to the routings, and I'll edit that just to show you that, we have the ability of doing, clean this up, work centers and machine centers, and we've got setup times, and we've got overhead rates that we can apply to that. There's actually a lot of complexity around scheduling here. So you've got a calendar that can be set up per work center, per machine center to account for different work shifts, accommodate holidays, vacation. If you wanted to go down to specific machines, you could track absences for example, for downtime for maintenance that might be on certain equipment. So it can be fairly sophisticated in terms of planning and scheduling if you need to do that. Some people do that, some people don't need that. If you've got just a single constraint, you could basically schedule from one work center and forward and backward from there. Pretty flexible though in terms of what the routing could look like.
Yeah.
And then on the bomb side, we do have, if I pull that up, edit that. So we've got the full bill of material capability. We could put items. We also have the ability to do other production bombs, so the full multi-level bill of materials if needed. These can also accommodate phantom bombs if you need to do that. You need to measure conversions, scrap rates. It's fairly sophisticated. I like to point out this routing link code. That really allows us to link then the bill of materials with the routing steps to make sure material shows up at the correct work center if you're using warehouse management, for example. So you get the correct picks, you get the correct putaways for material movements and handling. Very sophisticated integration with the warehouse management capabilities.
Yeah, so this is actually, routing link is a concept that, because in some systems, like if you're using an older, like 4-shift is the way I always equate it to, even though it has a newer version as well, but there have been ones in the SMB space that I encountered a lot of in manufacturing. They would actually have the bill of materials and the route together as one document. So you'd have, for example, your route step, and then you'd have the material requirements, and then the route step and the material requirements. I think the biggest transition with Business Central is that you don't have a combined route bill of material if you're used to that. You actually have a route that you set up that you saw, and then this production bomb that are actually separated, and then on the item you specify what route and what bill of material do you want to use. And the advantages of that is that you can do, for example, let's say you have the same product or similar products for that matter that take basically about the same amount of time when you do a time study for your manufacturing process. Instead of creating 16 different routes for each individual item, like let's say there's just a color variation, and so in your environment every part number is a different color variation that you have, but it's still the same route or the same process to build that product. You can define one route, assign that to the items, and then that cost for the labor, the capacity requirements when you're running MRP, all that then will be used for that particular route then when you do your operations, which I think is a pretty cool feature.
Yeah, and it makes setup and maintenance much easier to deal with.
Yep.
Yeah, more common, I guess, at least in my experience, to see the reuse of routings versus the reuse of the bomb.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. From there, we've got a lot of planning capabilities in the system. So in terms of replenishment, lead time calculations, that can go all the way to the supplier side of things. So if you've got lead time calculations on your vendors to bring in raw materials to impact your planning, not a problem. That's the whole planning worksheet process. And I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on that, but it's full MRP scheduling capabilities. You can split those if you want. I know Microsoft is working on some enhancements in this area that are coming, not in this version, but hopefully by the end of the year. In terms of production orders then, we've got a lot of stages for production orders. You've got the plan, your firm plan, you can do all sorts of different things there. This is just a released production order, which would be in your final steps. So just to pull this up to see how this all comes together. Down here on my line item, you can see my routing comes in here. I could tweak this if I wanted to on a specific production run for some reason, as well as my components. So that's my bill of material that's dropping in. So pretty straightforward here in terms of the production order. We do forward flushing, back flushing. Both of those have the ability then to add the warehouse picks,
Yep.
as well as the put away to it. So again, I think it's important to note that the warehousing functionality absolutely ties in with the manufacturing components to leverage that throughout the system. Item tracking lines, a lot of people love that, the whole serial lot tracking. So I could be serial lot tracking my finished good, as well as my raw materials that are going into the final product.
And that's important to note because that means full tracing capabilities too, right? So if
Absolutely.
we talk about a lot of people in food, they're like, well, I need to be able to trace, raw material lots or batches all the way to the finished good. And so inside of Business Central, we have that capability. But also, I mean, excuse me, serial numbers. So if you're, computer equipment manufacturer, and I've got a couple that I've gone through implementations with, tracking serial numbers of hard drives that are put into the actual machine, because maybe you need to service those. I mean,
Yep.
all that information can be tracked as part of that production process.
Yep. I hate to get us off on a side note there, but
Yeah.
I think the lot serial tracking in Business Central is phenomenal.
Oh,
I really
absolutely.
like the ability to track that lot and serial number at the time of consumption. So to your point, if I'm putting components into a computer, I don't need to track the serial number maybe at the point of receipt. I don't need to track it through bin movements. I don't need to track it on the pick. But at the point of actually doing the manufacturing, now I want to tag the serial number to know what actually went into the hardware. I can set up the system to do that.
Yeah.
So, in the case where I don't really need serial number tracking through the entire process, just at the point of consumption, we can set it up to do that. But we've done, medical device manufacturers is another example where you do need to track lot serial numbers through the entire process. Awesome. We can do that, track it all the way through. Record it for production purposes. Then on the item tracing side, I can say, here's a serial number that's gone for a recall. I can look through the manufacturing process, through the assembly process, all the way back to the purchase orders to know where did this thing come from. It would also record all the warehouse transfers if I need to know where has this item been. So if you think about food where I could have cross-contamination, I want to know, was it in this warehouse, that warehouse? I can track that through then for the tracing components of the items.
Yeah, and Rad, like you said, on their warranty work as well within BC, BC has
Yeah.
a very strong, I would say, service management capability inside of it. Service items, warranty information that you can specify. There are gaps with it. Like extended warranties and things of that
Yeah.
nature are a little more complex. But we've tackled them in the past for other customers.
Yep, yep. I worked with a client that did, yeah, warranty tracking was a big deal. They sold telephones, and they started doing repair work on phones that they didn't think they were actually selling to their customer. So they just scan the serial number at the point of shipment again, just to know, are we actually servicing equipment we sold, or are we servicing equipment someone else sold? So
Yep, yep, yep.
easy to implement that sort of functionality. Cool. All right. That's kind of what I wanted to hit. It's just a brief overview of what some functionality we've got. Again, it does, food and as well as medical device. So we've implemented both of those types of organizations using manufacturing, and then really everything in between. If we talk about maybe some limitations, I think the one limitation that I would see with the production order is the output component. So,
Yeah.
We've run into some situations with clients that, they maybe want to have multiple outputs from a production order. Sometimes we can make that work. Sometimes we can't with Business Central. So that could be an issue that comes about. There is a way to do some work with essentially negative consumption that we've worked through with some clients. So in terms of actually byproducts is on my mind because we're working with a prospect right now that needs byproduct tracking. We certainly can handle that with the negative consumption concept on a bill of material, but you wouldn't see the word byproduct necessarily in the production order.
Yeah, and just to be frank with that, I mean, byproduct is usually a output of a production process that doesn't have a cost related to it.
Yeah.
That's typical because it's waste. Now, some organizations put a cost to that, some don't. Co-product absolutely generally has a cost. That's where you're maybe producing multiple parts in one run. And so,
Yep.
when we start getting into those complexities, that's where we'll talk a little bit more on the supply chain side, or we have to look at third parties to be able to tackle some of those capabilities. So,
Yep.
just something to
Yep.
note.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's a good point,
All right.
Marcus. And then the shop floor is the only other one too, right? Just to say that typically
Yep.
shop floor would be another area that we'd want to tackle as well. Exploding pig problem in nav? What? Let's hope not. I don't know where that one's coming from. The don't warranty the donut hole exploding pig problem in nav. Big. Well, maybe big is what it was. Okay.
All
Well,
right.
Marcus, that makes sense. I appreciate that. It's a lot of background to cram into 20 minutes. I mean, I guess what we're saying is that obviously if you're a light assembler, assemblies would be an option for you. If you have manufacturing and you have basic manufacturing, multiple steps, for example, multiple routings or work centers in the routing, that's a great area as well. We've got finite capacity, so we can use a planning engine to schedule out load on work centers. It seems to have quite a bit then for the SMB space to be able to tackle some of those operations, it sounds like.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. All right, Adam, I know you've got some stuff that you wanted to take a look at as well. Did you want to do a presentation here? You are muted.
I am definitely muted.
There you're not.
There. Yeah, let me share my screen here quick and we can jump in. So really what I wanted to talk through today was, as we mentioned earlier, the front end. So the engagement with, say, a rep network or with your direct customers or anything like that. So we're going to be taking a look at portal capabilities and using Power Apps portals for that engagement vehicle and using some of the cool tools that we have to reduce overhead, streamline some of those work streams, and boost efficiency as you're moving through particular pipelining processes or orders, parts orders, structuring these orders and validation work streams and everything internally. So we'll get this up and running here. If I start sharing.
Switch over. Ta-da!
So can you see the portal here?
We can see the portal.
Perfect. Okay, so full disclosure, this is I started, and part of this is intentional. Started with a portal, Power Apps portal template. So instead of doing a naked, go customize what you want, start from essentially a blank app, I did start with the self-service model, and they have a number of other models within the Maker portal. But what's nice is you can have a starting block, and just like other, they're like the onboarding Canvas apps, or some of the Canvas or model-driven apps that are served up by Microsoft. Same applies to portals. So we do have some that you can use to take cues from, some design ideas, but this is the self-service. So it's branded Contoso. It's got all the Microsoft wrapping paper on it. But the use case here really is we've got our back office applications. We just walked through some awesome content that Marcus highlighted. The internal workings of production floor pieces and getting these things shipped out the door. But in terms of the front end and engaging with your reps or your customers or any prospects, what is the best space to do that? Historically, to get a portal stood up, whether that's homegrown or using various solutions that are out there, it has been a high overhead sort of endeavor, a lot of custom development, a lot of resources, a lot of planning, proofing, mock-ups, testing, and that not all of that goes away with Power Apps portals. But the beauty of using this tool is that with a few clicks, and that's not an exaggeration, if I'm in if I'm in my Maker portal here and I want to spin up a new app, it's as easy as going into creating a new portal and defining what it's going to be named, what the URL will be, and moving forward with your day. It'll be provisioned. I think 20, 30 minutes, and you should be able to jump into administration and a number of other pieces. So very easy to get the standing up. And then the for me anyway, the huge win is that this doesn't stage data. You don't need middleware. You don't need to invest in anything that makes the handshake work. This is working with a native tool on your CDS database with the same data. So you do have that true collaboration, regardless of who's submitting anything on the portal or who's consuming that and working with that internally. So what we see here, I was kind of zoomed in, so I'll reset that. This is our homepage, our landing screen. So we do have a knowledge. We have a faceted search. So if I type in, say, something like user guide, we're going to get a number of results. So for this one in particular, I think we've got 2. I'm sort of in admin mode. This little screen will pop up a few times. Forgive me for that one. But I just typed in user guide. So kind of like relevant search that we have within D365. So if I snap over, I'm going to go to another tab here. I have a few tabs open right now. But if I go over to D365 here, kind of like our relevant search, where if we type in Contoso, we're going to get kind of that Google-esque relevant search. I know that might be a little faux pas to say, but hey, they're the best in the biz. So, you're going to get a mix. You're going to get a list of relevant search results, whether those are opportunities, quotes, leads, contacts, etc. And on the left-hand side, you have your slicers. So parsing by record type or filtering by record type or some date ranges, things like that. The same applies to the portal. So, it has that broken out based on what it's pulling back within that query. And this is the portal faceted search. So that is a unique tool that comes baked into Power Apps portals. If I
just doesn't roll off the tongue as well as Google search does.
Earmuffs Microsoft.
Yeah.
Really never stood
Microsoft.
up. I've really never value propped Bing. So maybe I should, but it's always been Google. So further down we've got some knowledge base articles. So you think about the value prop there. Sales reps or people that are interested in sales collateral or these PDFs or decks or things that will enable your rep network or the people that are on your portal. We can use knowledge base articles. We can use some tools within the Power Apps portals to be able to do that and distribute that. So further down we do have related articles and this is really leaning on KB, what you see on the home screen. But up top I did tailor the sitemap a little bit, so it kind of parse things out into sales and customer support. So the front end and pipelining pieces, as well as, hey, if there are issues, break fix, that sort of thing. So if I click into the Sales Hub, I have things labeled opportunities and quotes. And then once we get a little further downstream, orders, or if I want to go directly to an order, I don't need a quote. I don't need any of the back and forth to structure that. We can go right and place an order directly. And then we've got reporting. So if I go to opportunities and quotes, we're not going to jump into every corner today. We really don't have the time to do so. I just wanted to show some key pieces of what the portal looks like out of the box. This can all be, I should, big asterisk here, underline, italicized, bold. All of this, this is a web page. So if you've got web development resources in-house, you can style this. You can go into the HTML and you can move elements. You can play with elements. You can, inject some JavaScript or Liquid or what have you to make this work the way you need it to work. I'm trying to really get out the off-the-shelf message. So this is how easy is it to get this standing up, operating at that operating level and start using it and start realizing that value in we're thinking days or weeks versus weeks, months, or longer. So what you see here really is trying to be as close to out of the box as possible. Now, I have a list of my opportunities here, and we can use some security, some security structure and configuration in the back end we only want to be displaying the data that people need or that the people should or the users should be able to see. So right here, I just have a couple of parts orders, a big parts order, and then an even bigger parts order. And these views, you can filter and sort just as you would within D365. On the right-hand side, there are a number of actions. So right here, I just have like a quick view of details, and then I can actually go and edit the opportunity, and we can control that. We can control the user experience with out-of-the-box tooling. So when I open up a form for editing, maybe just seeing a few fields that are editable and the others are read only. Right here we've got a number of different attribute types. So currency, text, here's a lookup. So if I wanted to go find our end customer that the rep is working with, right now I just have the Stoneridge software here, but that's all I have access to is this end user. We can set that up through relationships, parent account or the specific contact relationships. There are a number of configurability options for the security and the exposure exposure of all this data. So we can select that. Option sets are here as well. And then further down, I did put some address fields on the opportunity and map those downstream to the quotes and orders. And then down below, we've got our quotes. So, if we have our project information, we want to spin up a quote pretty quickly. At the bottom of this form, we do have generate quote, so in a single click that will create a new quote for us, and we can go into that quote specifically and edit it. You can see that, hey, a quote's been generated for this op. And if I go down, even within this grid, there are some metadata options in the configuration, but within the grid, we've got some actions too. So we can go ahead and activate these quotes. We can edit these quotes right from this opportunity. And down below, where it says files, that might look familiar to those that are working in D365 sales, customer service, field service. This is the native SharePoint integration. So this is getting into modern workplace applications. This is a SharePoint location that we are embedding on the opportunity form, and we have accessible both internally and externally for those users for any purchase orders or any specific product information requests, anything that's being accrued from a document management perspective along the sales cycle, along pre-sales and the pipelining, we can include right in Power Apps portals, right on these forms. If I went and added files, it's the general file explorer here. And then we can even create nested folders. So if I click new folder here, we're going to say subfolder. Naming is the worst thing in the world, so I'm not going to think too much about it. Create that folder, and that will create our folder hierarchy with that native SharePoint integration, which is pretty slick.
That's really nice. So kind of a big thing here. In manufacturing, it's all about a couple of things from the customer's perspective. Number one, being able to get access to information about your product, right? And so, you guys on stream, you're probably seeing me resize Adam's connection is going back and forth, so the NDI stream goes bigger and smaller, so you'll see me resize. But beyond that, so from a manufacturer perspective, I want to be able to look up documentation on how to build a product, for example, and it could be an internal portal too. So these portals, we talk about customer facing in this scenario, but what about employee? What about like an employee work area that they can submit issues towards, and it integrates into the common data service to send that information back to us? What happens if they just want to do a time off request, or if they want to interact about an order and see some order information? You could make this a customer-facing portal or an employee-facing portal or even a vendor-facing portal. So this is where we start getting into vendor collaboration. So you've got raw material requirements. Have it so that they can go bid on an order, or so that they can confirm an order. You could use portals for all of this capability, it sounds like.
Correct. Yeah. Partner for those, the vendors, third-party reps. This is customer self-service. And there are, marketing scenarios or employee, like in internal use portals as well for that purpose. Maybe people on the floor, people that are out in the field, they don't need licenses. This is all really latched onto your use case and your business case. So, make sure that you're talking about that and what the requirements really are. But what Scott has just said, the internal use of this is huge as well. So, it's scalable, it's flexible, and there are a lot of options. Now, when I was in that opportunity, just to kind of juxtapose this a little bit, if I crack that back open, if you saw in that quotes grid, we actually do have the ability to let users download. So if I downloaded this list of quotes, it's going to just dump everything into an Excel file. So we'll save that up. It's pretty quick to grab that. But you can imagine if you had a specific a specific reporting tool, or you wanted to as a vendor or a partner or a rep, grab data and put it into your own systems without going down the custom API pull or any custom integration route. You can do this very easily. A couple of clicks and you've got the data that you need to work with. Now, if you wanted to take reporting to the next level and really house it all in one spot, that's where I have reporting actually baked into this portal here. So if I go to reporting, this is going to think for a second. and it's flashing Power BI. So we have a Power BI, a full dashboard, a full report here. Now this is just sample data. Again, full disclosure, this isn't pulling from the instance I'm working on, but it really, if you wanted more robust reports, if you wanted the ability for the reps or the internal employees or anybody that's hitting your portal that you're working with to be able to access these more robust reports and have the full Power BI experience with slicing and dicing within the Power Apps portal, you can certainly do so. It does take a few steps to get Power BI registered. You need the updated workspaces to work with. You need to go into Azure and create. You need to have. There's a little bit of back-end setup for it, but it's pretty straightforward to get this embedded pretty quickly. So I really love the ability. The big considerations for me here are security authentication, like passing those parameters and making sure that we're exactly. Yep. But just in terms of having that marriage of Power BI and the Power Apps portals, really flexing the Power Platform tools, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how like we've been talking about the Power Platform, and kind of the intent of Confab was to start opening people's eyes to the technologies that are out there. And CDS has been the big one that we've drilled into for a lot of the confabs when we start looking at CRM and how ERP works together with it. I mean, that's kind of the same thing here, is that when we go into a presentation, we talk to somebody about being able to visualize your data, about being able to connect to your vendors and your customers and your employees, because we're all trying to basically improve kind of that feedback loop, is the way I always look at it, where you've got vendors that need feedback in terms of what the expectations are for when they're going to deliver the product for you, so that way you can set your expectations then with customers, and knowing that one impacts the other is really critical. So anything that you can become more rapid at to be able to address the issue, and then also just have the exceptions or even make it self-service, because like for me as a customer, I'm a big self-service advocate. I do not like talking to people about something. I want to go online, I want to download the documentation, and I want to follow that documentation to debug it. An example is Samsung. At one point, the fan was going out on my amplifier, and I'm just like, ship me the fan. Instead, they wanted me to take the entire thing apart, send me a shipping label, and then send the entire unit out, and I'm just like, no, I just need a 40 millimeter fan. That's all I need. Just ship it to me. I can take a picture or a video for it. So anything that you can help improve that customer experience makes it so that that person, I don't buy Samsung amplifiers anymore, but makes it so that person has a better experience, which is kind of towards that business perspective that we're trying to accomplish.
Definitely. So one thing to kind of close out with, well, two things. I want to go to my support. You did see that we have the knowledge base and we do have forums if you want to build a community. That's pretty cool. If you just full disclosure, make sure that you're monitoring the forums. So there is some admin component to that. But I went to the support area here. Further down, I actually have a Power Virtual Agents bot embedded on this forum. So if you're, somebody's going in there, I need help. And this does use natural language analysis. So if there are misspellings, we have some of that fuzzy logic that's baked into this exchange here, but this is leading on Power Virtual Agents for the frontline bot experience. And the value prop here for me is, a lot of this is done by humans. A lot of this is email, phone, maybe web submissions that people are fielding and then people are acting with. So there is a particular frontline work stream for people in the customer service space or rep support or anything like that. Imagine being able to reduce some of that overhead and focus some of that effort and that time elsewhere on more important pieces internally, and use these bots, use this intelligence as that frontline mechanism to be able to help people out. So right here, I need help, and there are a number of trigger phrases that would start us on this logical path here. But hey, did you mean customer support? Yes, I did. And then it'll give us a couple of options. Hey, what do you need help with? Check case status. So this actually would use Power Automate to pull in a case number and give you a status or a couple of tidbits. Submit a new case and payments. Like these are going to give us the pages on the portal for those pieces specifically. Blogs and learning. If I click on that one here, It's going to give us a breakdown of, hey, we got you covered. Which products are you looking to learn more about? We've got the different, this is a Stoneridge, kind of a Stoneridge use case. But if I select Power Platform here and we move through, hey, you can find more resources by clicking here. If I click on that, we're going to get the Stoneridge blog that's filtered down. So it really just uses this URL to filter down to all of our Power Platform blogs, and at the end, hey, did that answer your question? Yes. And then it's going to give us our little CSAT. It was excellent service, bot. Thank you so much. But this is, surfacing some help guides or routing people to different web pages, or just the kind of menial stuff that really bogs people down and might bottleneck somebody's day. We can use these sorts of solutions to be able to wipe that away and really automate that on your website, and even internally. We can inject this into Teams as well. So it's pretty slick stuff.
Yeah, that is awesome. And like we were saying, so Rad, as you were going through and making comments, I mean, this is all out of the box. There are some, I think, configurations, Adam, that you've done. And when I say configurations, more about basically ensuring that that the Power Virtual Agent, for example, you had to set up the hierarchy, I'm assuming, with that for the questions and answers to that. But like Rad said as well, I mean, you could set that up to do a skills matrix lookup. Like Power Virtual Agent, I need help producing this part internally for manufacturing, and then all of a sudden, here's the 5 people that have that skill that you could actually call on, and here's their phone numbers. So yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Cool.
So there are some internal, in terms of like consuming that, the requests, the opportunities, working with cases. We didn't really get to that today, but we've got a continuing webinar series, and we'll check out some other resources for managing internal work streams with business process flows, branching flows, and some pieces inside the system too.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you. That was awesome content. So yeah, Britt, like you said, I mean, PVA, I mean, it is really cool what you can do with that. The question answer and then directing you to the right information is really critical. So I guess the kind of the tail end here, let's talk about, so we've talked about the front end portion of it with Adam in terms of some of the portal concepts I think that you should be exploring. We've talked about, Business Central and its capabilities. The other one we want to talk about is going to be Dynamics 365 supply chain. And there's a lot of confusion around this in the market. And I agree. I mean, it's almost frustrating to an extent to be in conversations with customers that are just like, I don't know which one to provide or which one to use in terms of Dynamics 365 supply chain or Business Central. So kind of the high level story here, if you don't know it, Nav or Business Central and Finance and Operations, or what it's now called Supply Chain, are 2 different products provided by Microsoft. They exist on Dynamics 365, and interestingly, they are kind of the only 2 products that really don't coexist with each other because they're ERP applications. And that's not that's a generalization. There's different concepts called hub and spoke and things that we could talk about in more detail. But from a customer point of view, typically you either choose Dynamics 365 Business Central or Dynamics 365 Supply Chain as your inventory manufacturing management system, and you don't have both of them. They don't typically coexist, whereas you could have Dynamics 365 Field Service with Dynamics 365 Supply Chain. They coexist very nicely. CRM coexists very nicely. So there's products that you have to think about when you come to that. So when we talk to customers, what is the main differences between them? And that's what we want to highlight today, is so that you can kind of understand what should I be looking at. And so a couple of the things to note here. If you are less than 20 users, you typically should not be looking at supply chain. Supply chain, Dynamics 365 supply chain, what we're going to show for some of the concepts here, is really classified as a tier 1 application. So when we talk about SAP and Oracle, that's our competition in that market space that we're in with Dynamics 365 supply chain. You can imagine Dynamics 365 supply chain as a much more advanced manufacturing system than that of Business Central. But with that, there's a downside to that, meaning that there are more steps typically in that process to produce a product compared to Business Central. And there are more setups as well, because you think about an enterprise, you've got more people, more areas, more quality checks, more product types, more variations that you need to really take into account as part of that manufacturing process. So if you are usually, I'll say 100 million to 150 million and up, that's where you start looking or asking for a comparison between the two. Or if you're like, for example, 50 users and up is kind of where I draw the line with in my mind between Business Central and supply chain. That's kind of the generalization. Now, quite frankly, once again, it's a generalization, and you want to talk to a partner to really dissect what areas are going to influence that decision either way. Because, for example, we have sites that are 10,000 users that are on Nav, which is the predecessor to Business Central, and they use the manufacturing capabilities, and it's not a problem. So it really depends. So let's kind of go into that. And
I think we had a question there though in the chat: multinational, multi-language, multi-currency.
That's not even a separator really as much anymore, because they're both.
It's really blurred. Yeah. Nav BC can do the multi-language and all the multi-currency stuff that you'd need too. So
So it's an interesting perspective right now. So let's go ahead. I'm going to show you a screen. We've got our wonderful Skype in the background. And I've got like just a high-level kind of a presentation that I usually use in our sales demos, where we really talk about kind of those main differences. And the big one here that I wanted to highlight is that, so when we start talking about supply chain, and we're now on the enterprise perspective of this is where we have some more complexity in terms of what we do in our manufacturing process. So an example, inside of Dynamics 365 supply chain, you have a concept called lean manufacturing that you can introduce, which allows you to do more of the Kanban, water spider, many of those lean-based concepts inside of manufacturing that don't exist natively out of the box within Business Central. So that's one thing to note. We can do projects, so taking an actual project and then scheduling, for example, work off of that for production. Inside of Business Central, it's not as, I would say, robust, I guess is the word I would use with it. We've got some ways to do that from jobs, but it doesn't really tie into the same level of detail as our project system does. And then discrete, I think Business Central's got a really solid foundation for that. I don't typically worry about discrete manufacturers within Business Central. I've been able to tackle in my career many installations of discrete manufacturing without a problem. But process manufacturing is where Business Central is a differentiator too, meaning that supply chain has process manufacturing capabilities built into it, whereas Business Central does not. You have to use either a third party, or you have to change your mentality on how you do your batch processing, for example, into more of a discrete fashion. But that starts to really fall apart when you use byproducts and co-products, and especially if you need costing on the byproducts and co-products. If you do $0 cost for byproducts and co-products, not a problem. The moment that you start moving to costing, that's where we start running into more issues with it, unless we use a third party. And the big thing here, though, that I wanted to highlight is that when we start looking at a manufacturing process, I'm not going to build it all out, but because we have multiple legal entities inside of Dynamics 365 supply chain, we can also set up different inventory or supply chain policies then for each of those legal entities. So that way, if we have a process manufactured item, we'll say that we actually do the manufacturing of a lubricant that's used then as well inside of a discrete part, for example, through a different legal entity that we may own. You can set that up inside of the Dynamics 365 supply chain to reflect that entire process. So you can have a mixture of batch, intercompany, purchasing, production, and Kanban processes all inside of the Dynamics 365 supply chain environment. And kind of the last area to note, too, is the complexity, then, of the production process. So when you heard Marcus talk about plan versus firm plan versus different states of a production order, what we call cycles of the production order, inside of Dynamics 365 supply chain, we've got a lot more. We've got cost estimation. We've got scheduling from both an operation and a job scheduling perspective. We've got a releasing of it. We've got a starting state of it. We've got a finish state, a costing or a report as finished state. So there's all these different states inside of the production life cycle that we have that also makes a pretty drastic difference. So with that, let's go ahead and log into my environment so we can take just a quick look at kind of the capabilities inside of here. We're going to log in, and it should probably log into my retail environment. So really quickly here, I'm going to switch over to USMF and make sure I've got the full screen for you guys here. So when we start talking manufacturing, let's talk about some of the major differences between the products. So the first is going to be when we looked at release products that we have inside of our environment, there's going to be some differences inside of here that we're going to tackle. More specifically, what are the different types of release products that we have, and then what is also those bill of materials or some of the details related to it that drive that. And so to kind of highlight that, for example, in this environment, we're going to take a look, and I've got, I believe, ethanol inside of here. And the environment's a little slow. I just turned it on. It's a dev environment, so it's actually caching in the background. But what this is going to highlight and what we're going to show with it is basically going to be the release product and understanding of what those details are. And while we're waiting for that to load up, because I did go into a couple of other areas, well, click on, for example, ethanol here to go into the environment and take a look at it. But over here as well, what we can also do is talk about some of the other concepts that don't exist inside of Business Central, namely like a manufacturing execution system. So this is an example here. If I go ahead and log in while we're waiting for that product to pop up, where I actually have a manufacturing or shop floor control capability built into finance and operations, or what we call supply chain. And from here, if I go ahead and open that, I'm able to actually go through and then log information as part of my process. So Marcus showed you the bill of materials setup and the routing setup related to it. On the execution side, typically you're at the production order and there's a production journal that you own, and there's not a guided type screen like the job card terminal here to go through a manufacturing process. So in here, for example, this is where I can actually see all the jobs that are allocated then towards my resource or my work center that I'm going to be doing as part of my work. I can go and look at the production order just like Marcus showed as well by clicking on that and then seeing all the detail related to it. Some of the major differences inside of here are that I'm able to, for example, on my schedule, go to a Gantt chart to pull this information up at the actual work center level to be able to then go through scheduling operations too. So if I want to move things around, or if I want to see what that allocation is going to be for that time for those processes, I can define that inside of here, and I can even move it around then inside of here as well. So there's a visual component that's built into supply chain that doesn't exist really inside of Business Central. Other aspects that are important here too, as you can see, when we start looking at the production order and we start looking at the details of it, the bill of material, the route, the formulas, that's a major difference as well inside of Dynamics 365 supply chain, where a BOM is more of a discrete type process, but a formula, as we're going to take a look here in the ethanol blend that we're creating, a formula, if I go down to here, is a production type that we can define. And what that does then is that makes it so that I don't enter in bill of materials, but I enter in formulas. And when we talk about formulas, this is where we start getting into more complex co-product and byproduct scenarios, where we can actually go through and then define then all the different steps that are required then for the production of, for example, ethanol, where I've got raw materials, for example, down here that are being consumed, or ingredients that are typically called inside of an actual batch process. But I also then have co-products that also may be manufactured as well. So that way, as I'm producing this, I have additional parts that are being produced, and then I may have cost allocation towards that. So for example, if these cost $100 in total when I'm making this batch, and I have a finished good of ethanol, but then I also have another byproduct or co-product that is 10% of the cost, the finished good would have $90 as a finished good cost, and then that byproduct or co-product would then theoretically have $10 because it's 10% of that cost. And there's capabilities like total cost allocation, As you can see, as I go into this, it just gets so much more detailed in terms of what those capabilities are. And then when we start talking about pharmaceutical capabilities, where we have ingredient types, where you've got active, compensating, and filler ingredients that you may use in a formula that scale based off of an attribute of a particular product. So an example of that would be if you have sulfuric acid concentrations, and as part of your output of your product, you need to scale then both the compensating ingredient as well as the active ingredient and filler all at the same time. The system can calculate then the quantity requirements based off of those ingredient types and the actual attribute of the sulfuric acid, for example. So if it's 50% sulfuric acid versus 75%, it knows then how to scale that based upon that actual attribute value. So some really advanced capabilities that are built into there. And then when we start looking at the shop floor capabilities, I mean, this is where you can start your jobs. You can bundle jobs together to split labor across multiple production orders. You can view, for example, the time that you have spent inside of a manufacturing process to see what's expected when you clocked in, when you clocked out, and basically when you went through all those different operations. And kind of the key highlight here as well is that another main difference that we have inside a supply chain is that when you were looking at the route that Marcus was setting up, you had work centers that were inside of each of those operations that he was basically highlighting. Whereas within supply chain, we still have the operations. We still have all the different times that you define for it as well, with setup, runtime, processing time. So those are all very similar. But what you also have is the ability to, at each operation level, define something that we call resource requirements, which is a hugely different concept compared to what Business Central is. In Business Central, you'll assign a specific work center or area to it, whereas within Dynamics 365 Supply Chain, you can specify, for example, a type of resource, a specific resource, a grouping of resources, a specific capability, a skill, a course, or certificate, or a title. And basically what you do is you go to your resources and you then say, this machine has this capability, this machine has the cutting capability, or this machine that's over in a different work center also has the cutting capability. And what the system can then do is it can find then what is applicable based off of those particular resources and requirements that you've set for those capabilities, as we call them, the resource requirements that we see inside of here. That just makes it so that if you think about it, when you're planning production, that it knows that there's multiple work centers that could be used as part of that process. And then lastly, there are some priorities here, meaning different actions or secondary paths that you can have within the actual manufacturing process that is more complex than just parallel routing. So, serial routing is step A, then step B, then step C. Parallel routing may be that you have step A and step B starting at the same time, and then they join to step C, would be an example of parallel that joins into a singular operation. But you may then have multiple secondary operations that start at the same time that you want to link together in a sequence, and you can define then those priorities that really drive that. So, like I said, just a lot more in terms of the capabilities that you would look at inside of here. But, kind of with that, I mean, that's where we start getting then into, it's, right, guys, it's going to be more complex to implement. So you're looking at a time frame here. Like, I could do everything Marcus could do inside of Business Central, but it's going to take me 2 to 3 times longer for the services portion of that to do that process. To do the setup of the process more than the process itself. Example would be if I wanted to do it where in BC you want to, when you create the production order and you finish it, everything gets backflushed with it. You can do that as well inside of supply chain, but the setup for it is much larger. It's 2 to 3 times more time to go through that setup process. So, is there anything else, guys, that you can think of that I missed on here that would make sense to cover as well? No, we've got CDS integrated with it. We've got shop floor control. We've got vendor collaboration as well that's built into it as features. Those are kind of the other major highlights. I don't know, Marcus, if there's been other questions that you've seen on the SMB side that may apply here as well.
I don't think so. The shop floor data control is a big one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm the the weird CRM plus one guy, so I've been nodding my head fervently for a while here. Start talking CDS. Integrations and
Ready to
everything.
go.
Great, that's perfect. Speaking of, for anybody watching, if anybody didn't see yesterday, huge news: Transact SQL and CDS is reaching SQL parity, which is, I mean, that's bringing walls down, integration walls down. That's huge. So I think that was announced at the Business Application Summit yesterday, and there's some there's some screens where they're actually going through T-SQL. So it's awesome stuff.
I agree. It's TDMS will not, or TDS, tabular data stream, will not leave us, right?
Yeah.
It's still here to stay. And I see
Cal
nice.
L agrees.
Yeah, I can tell. I didn't see that till
yeah.
now.
That's the cameo for this week.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, guys, I think we're getting to time here. We're at noon. I know many of you have beer and pizza if you're on our team, and maybe it's virtual now at this point. Virtual happy hours are going on as well. But I want to just kind of disclose what's coming up next week. So not next week, 2 weeks from now, May 21st. Sabrina, thank you so much in chat. I'm looking over here and I see that. I'm so happy. So we've got Power Virtual Agents and Bots that are coming up, I think. Adam, you're going to be doing that. Do you want to give a plug on what we're going to cover there?
I'm pumped. I'm really excited for that. So we took a look at how it's going to look and feel on the front end. So as somebody who's accessing and speaking with or engaging with the bot, but we're going to pop the hood on how to structure in the point and click configuration, the low code, no code of setting up those logical pathways, the inputs, using Power Automate to go retrieve data, and just some considerations on deployment and some of the tooling within. So it'll be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And then we'll have customer insights and then enterprise asset management and preventative maintenance as kind of the topics then that covers the next 4 weeks. It sounds like as well we've got another webinar on May 20th that we recommend you guys check out too. It's 10 ways to increase productivity on the manufacturing floor. So that's actually, I don't know, Marcus, are you doing that one or is that delivery? That's our delivery team, I believe, that's doing that, which is awesome because then it's not just the pre-sales guys that are talking to you. You get to, see what the delivery team is saying as well. Exactly, right? And then, like we said, there's going to be a lot of topics as well that we'll keep on posting and updating that are part of it. So, I think that kind of wraps it up. Yeah, I am. I know, Sabrina. Yeah. So, anything else? Any parting words of wisdom, gentlemen?
Nope.
I don't have anything. No. Stay safe. Get outside. Get some sun.
Enjoy the fresh air as much as you can, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's definitely getting to that point. So, well, guys, thank you again for joining. We'll see you in 2 weeks with those topics. And then, like everyone says, stay safe and make sure to have fun. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.